Unacademy. Let's crack it.
What are the challenges to the multi-party parliamentary democracy in India?
Right, sir. So one of the biggest challenges to multi-party parliamentary democracy in India, I believe, sir, is the blurring of ideological lines along which parties are constituted. If we look at the traditional definition of political parties, it is a group of people who come together because they have a shared vision for India. Nowadays, sir, it is electoral success rather than a shared ideological vision for country, which is the main catalyst for people taking stands on issues. And when you have that happening, that has leading to a decline of multi-party parliamentary democracy because
Will it be proper? Will it be more appropriate for the country to have a dual party system instead of multi-party system?
Sir, multi-party system, I think, is something that is in the interest of the Indian democracy because, again, like I mentioned, sir, we are a very diverse country with a lot of voices and voices that need to be heard. So it is through these parties that these voices can be heard at the highest level of legislature.
What happens when a single party gets huge majority, brute majority?
Yes, sir.
Don't you think that it leads to democracy slips into some kind of autocracy?
Whenever we have one party getting an overwhelming majority of seats in the legislature, as this is the scenario right now, where we see the NDA alliance having an overwhelming majority, there is naturally some sort of erosion of democracy to the extent that the amount of debates and discussions go down. But I feel we don't necessarily slip into autocracy because of the fact that we have separation of powers hardwire into our constitution, and that is why we have institutions like the judiciary which step in to prevent that transition into authoritarianism.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Federalism and governance.
Right, sir.
You look at China, you look at Vietnam, you look at Korea, you look at Singapore, you look at Japan. Those countries, after Second World War, the starting point was very similar. Germany,
Right,
France,
right, sir.
and they are way ahead of India. So if I make a statement that India's federal structure and democracy is a drag on economic growth, how will you comment on this?
Sir, to the proposition that India's federal structure and democracy is a drag on Indian economic growth, sir, I will be against that motion, sir. I do not believe so, sir. We as a nation have existed and have achieved tremendous amounts of growth that we already have, is precisely because of the fact that we are a federal and we are a democratic setup. For some reason, had we not given up the powers that we have to our federating or subnational units, there could have been possibilities of greater secessionist movements happening, which would have further downgraded our economic growth. Secondly, in case of when we talk about democracy, I think our people have immense credibility as political voters than they are given credit for. And they have time and again proved their ability to demand the people in power to step up to the game and deliver on their promises. That is why we as a country are talking about development rhetoric. The rhetoric in our electoral sphere is development about transitioning into the Amrit Kal, is because at some level we are expressing our desire to be a growing nation.
All right. Now, after this Ukraine war, a lot of countries are trying to establish a financial system outside of SWIFT.
Right, sir.
So, how is India actually taking advantage of this in trying to reduce its dependency on dollars as a currency for trade?
Right, sir. So SWIFT, if I understand correctly, is a system for interbank transaction. And when we look at this issue, it is basically an issue of the global south asserting itself against the dominance of dollar, which is nothing but reflective of the changing multipolar world order that we live in. We were living in the times of Pax Americana, when there was American supremacy, which was also reflected in the supremacy of the dollar. Now we live in a multipolar world order where countries like India, China, Brazil, Germany, they are asserting themselves, and that is achieved through creating parallel institutions. For instance, if we talk about India doing one-to-one swap currency, India establishing its line of trade, India willing to do trade in rupees is one method to challenge the dominance of dollar. Similarly, other institutions like Asian Infrastructure and Investment Bank have been created for providing investment options to countries apart from Western dominated institutions. So
Okay.
these are the ways in which I think we are trying to revitalize the